So why TikTok is getting banned by the US? Are we seeing a new chapter of trade war between US and China? Or I should say we are seeing a Cold War 2.0?
Why? That's a good question.
Yeah.
God knows. But I think in the traditional sense of a new chapter, perhaps, but we're not in a traditional world anymore. What happens today is every day there's a new branch of crazy is kind of thrown out there. But I think more important than that is actually looking a little bit further back behind it. A lot of people immediately will say, well, you know, China has all their own rules. You need to do joint ventures. They steal your IP. You must do this. You must do that. Communist Party owns everything. And if you look at that, every country is their own sovereign nation, right? So every country has their own jurisdiction, their own legislation, their own ways of doing things. The difference that we've got here is when you go and do business in China, there are a set of rules, just like anywhere else. But you have the ability to look at those rules and regulations and say, and analyze them and weigh them up to decide whether or not you want to do business there, right? If those rules and regulations are not to your liking, no one is forcing you to do anything. If you can live with those rules and regulations, if you feel that they're okay, then you proceed and do business in China. And many companies have very, very healthy businesses in China, very, very healthy, growing businesses in China where they're serving the Chinese population, Chinese people, and they're making profits, right? However, what we've got here with this TikTok situation is where rules are being turned over in mid-game, basically, right? So after a company like TikTok has spent billions of dollars in the American market, they generate 42% of their revenues from the States. They have over close to 2,000 people, employees in the States. Their CEO announced 2 months ago that they were going to hire 10,000 people in the States. They spent alone last year, on advertising budget, they spent over $1 billion just on Snapchat, right? Which is quite ironic in itself. And they're Facebook's in-app advertiser, #1 advertiser for 4 quarters in a row. Now, after having done that, then you turn around and say to them, well, actually the rules have changed and this is how it's going to be. That doesn't fly. On top of that, it doesn't fly in terms of, it doesn't fit the American narrative or the Western narrative of free trade, open economy, fair play, abiding by the rules. All of these things that they accuse China of doing, they are doing themselves right now. Just imagine what the world would say if tomorrow the Chinese government turns around and says to Tesla, who have a beautiful, massive new factory in Shanghai, if they turn around and said, Tesla, sorry, if you want to do business in China, this is what needs to happen. You have 45 days to sell your company, to sell Tesla, right, Tesla China, to a company that we approve, to a Chinese company that we approve. And on top of that, the Chinese company that buys Tesla for China will also buy Tesla for Australia, New Zealand, and the UK and Canada, right? And on top of that, when that transaction happens, the Chinese government, you are going to pay the Chinese government, I think in Trump's words were, a very healthy and significant portion of the sale price will be paid to the Chinese government as a finder's fee.
I did say that if you buy it, whatever the price is, that goes to whoever owns it, because I guess it's China.
What do you think the world would say if that happened? What do you think the world would say? Now, that's exactly what's happened in the States, right, with TikTok. And TikTok is, you know, by all accounts, a $60 billion company. We're not talking about a small startup in someone's garage, and yet everyone's talking about national security.
Yeah.
But national security goes away once you've sold the company to an American company and paid a finder's fee to the American government. Then there's no more national security issue. Very strange, isn't it?
Yeah. And Kibros, what's your opinion about like banning of TikTok?
The central government enacted the Hong Kong SAR, National Security Law. It was totally within their sovereign powers and it was constitutionally justified. But then all the Western countries and even some of America's allies around the world immediately condemned us for doing that. But I mean, the US has the Patriot Act, which is a national security law. The UK has anti-terrorism acts, which are totally the same. If you look at the provisions within those acts.
Identical.
Basically identical, right? And even the punishments themselves, basically identical.
Death.
Yeah,
exactly.
Death.
Yeah,
The UK's
That's for
sedition and
treason,
treason law.
right? Yeah.
Patriot Act. There are still people in Guantanamo Bay. 15 years later, there's 600 or 700 people in Guantanamo Bay. No access to a trial, no access to a lawyer.
Right.
And yet they will scream and shout about the the trampling of democracy or whatever it is that's supposed to be happening in Hong Kong.
Right.
That's right.
Right. So I think it's totally within our prerogative, and the act itself makes a lot of sense. It's totally justified, and it will be interpreted in accordance with our judiciary, our common law values. So I think there is totally no problem with that. But then the West is totally silent on the ban of TikTok, which directly goes against everything that they stand for, everything that their world order stands for, free markets, free investment, everything like that. If national security could simply be used as an excuse to ban foreign companies from participating in the U.S. economy, then why are they criticizing us for banning Google or for banning Facebook? I mean, we didn't even ban Google.
Google,
just
Facebook,
didn't
none of
want
those things
to
were
do business
ever
with
banned in China. That's the other thing. So a lot of the commentary that you see, especially from like wannabe talk show hosts from the West, they're always referring to this ban of Google and ban of Facebook. They were never banned.
Right.
And Google has operations in China. They have hundreds of employees in China. Right? They have an R&D center in China. So it's not like they don't exist there. They were just presented with a set of laws and said, these are the conditions of working here. If you wish to conduct business here, these are the conditions. People choose whether or not they want to follow those conditions or not.
Right.
And for their advertising businesses, they make decisions not to follow those conditions. They were never banned, right? They were absolutely never banned. Because on the flip side, you have someone like Elon Musk and Tesla, who is extremely happy to be operating in China. It constitutes a significant part of Tesla's revenue now, sky-high share price. He got significant funding from the Chinese government to build his factories, to alter the supply chain, to provide the local technology, locally built technology to go into Teslas, right? So again, this is the truth. These are real examples, not this colored, biased lens that we constantly see.
Right.
I think what's also scary is that TikTok isn't the first, and nor is it the last either, right?
There will be a lot of, let's say, Chinese high-tech companies that will be banned by the US government.
And we've already had, from the previous months, iFlyTech, Huawei, a whole raft of companies that have been given sanctions, all under national security. It's also interesting to note that, there's an American company who we happen to, as disclosure, we happen to have shares, have investment in them as well. A company called Palantir, which is founded by Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel's one of the founders of PayPal, a very vocal Trump supporter. Palantir is $20-30 billion company that plans on listing on the stock exchange in the coming months. They recently announced. Palantir as a company is funded by the NSA, by the CIA. Its client bases include the Defense Department, the Pentagon, various police departments.
One of the most secretive and controversial companies in Silicon Valley.
CEO of one of Silicon Valley's most secretive companies.
A secretive CIA-backed startup helps clients.
Secretive. And yes, Palantir is secretive.
And it's responsible for, in the CEO's own words, on a recent interview from March this year.
Our product is used on occasion to kill people.
In his own words, responsible for killing people, right? The company provides technology to allow the US government to kill people. Yeah? The company also did a deal with the British government, and the British government allowed it access to millions of British citizens' NHS records, including not only their health, their gender, their name, their sex, but their religious affiliation, political affiliation, previous criminal history, all sorts of information like that. And yet there's no outcry, right? There's no outcry at all. Now, surely that would be a national security issue, right? Not an app, no matter how popular it is, but of sharing videos and dancing, yeah? I mean, there's a slight difference there.
Yeah.
But before you did mention that it's very controversial what US is doing, because US is supposed to be a free market.
Yeah.
What is trying to achieve the US government by doing this? You think like it's like an election propaganda, or probably like the US is in a total status of fear in the view of fact that China has become a superpower in the high-tech sector?
So first of all, I think that the whole decision is basically going against the US founding Republican principles in its constitution, and also, of course, the principle of fair market. So basically, China has always been, China has this official characterization of socialism with Chinese characteristics. Now, I would say it's actually capitalism with American characteristics. Of course, I recognize that America can do whatever it likes in its sovereign territory, right? They can prioritize American firms fine. But having such an unconvincing justification we talked about to ban a company that's not even a startup company, but a very large company that is actually registered in the US. And by the way, TikTok, although it's kind of similar to Douyin in China, has deliberately separated its operations. All right. The TikTok company decided to evacuate from Hong Kong because of the Hong Kong national security law. So it shows that they actually tried to protect Western interests in that way. And even they have tried to comply with all the US regulations. So I think that sort of justification is without proof and also is not fair or free. If Abraham Lincoln or like George Washington are alive today, they would be probably ashamed.
Yes. I think it also ties into how Trump is performing very poorly in the public polls for the November elections. I think that's partly because of its very poor handling of the coronavirus pandemic, and also because I feel like if you look at Republican voters, most of them don't really care about China. This is not a very salient issue for them. But Trump is just keeps on pestering China, and he's trying to pander to the military-industrial complex, to the special interest groups, to the donors, to the Republican elites, but they don't resonate with the Republican voters don't resonate with them. And I feel like this is one of the problems with democracies, and you see this happening even in India. Whenever the country does poorly or the government does poorly, they immediately try to instigate some sort of
you have
aggression.
To find a scapegoat.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's the same.
You have to externalize your failures
Exactly.
in order to kind of like distract the
The
public
attention.
from your failures.
Exactly.
And I feel like this is what's happened with India, this was happening with the States. This is what happened with Thatcher during the Falklands War. I mean, Thatcher did so poorly with the economy. She destroyed all the mining towns in the Midlands, right? And so therefore, she had to instigate some sort of foreign aggression. And I think not only is this super detrimental to cooperation between countries, it also shows that democracy is not a perfect system. And I simply cannot understand why Hong Kong youngsters can look at the West, look at Trump, look at the United States, and still feel like this is such a perfect system. We have to embrace every single element of that.
Just one point to add is that I think another reason is the American establishment. It's like a consensus nowadays among both Republicans and Democrats that they're pretty much worried about China's rise. So I think they have sort of started to wake up to the fact that China's actually potentially or even has surpassed them in many areas, technology, with the car industry, etc., etc. Everything in China nowadays is just so high tech. If you go to pay in a restaurant, just scan the QR code of like the WeChat, Alipay, whatever. Whereas now in the US, people still use cash. People still use like credit cards, debit cards. In that sense, the US is kind of actually stuck in the past, and China is actually moving forwards.
It's the same thing with London, right? You can't even access the internet when you're riding.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right.
And they don't even have air conditioning.
Nope.
I first started writing about exactly this issue back in 2016 under the tag China Matters, and it really was trying to highlight these examples of where the new technologies and innovations that were being built in China and rolled out in China, where they were just so far advanced compared to the rest of the world in the States. But back to your point, Stefano, is why is this happening? Is it because the US is scared? Yeah, absolutely. Look, if you've been, and I understand, right? I say this often. I understand why you are doing this or why you feel this way. Because I would feel this way too. I would hope I would act differently, but I would feel the same way. It's just a natural reaction, right? And so there's a number of different ways you can deal with your reaction or your feeling of fear. You can, like a small child who loses a game in a playground, throw all the toys on the floor and say, I'm not playing anymore.
That's exactly what's happening with Hong Kong youngsters, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or you can sit back and think, okay, how do I get better? How do I learn from what's happening in China and maybe take some of the things that I like, disregard the things that I don't like, but take the things that I do like to advance my own company, my own people, my own economy, my own family, whatever, so that I can get better and the world can get better, right? Yeah. So it's positive and forward looking, as opposed to where we have now, which is just very negative, hate-filled, regressive policies, which harken back to the Cold War. Yeah. It's like the Cold War combined with this neo-colonial mentality that still thinks I'm number one.
And then in November there are the elections. So,
Right. And unfortunately, I don't know whether or not it makes a difference if it's a Democrat in the presidential house, in the chair, or Republican with regards to their view on China right now. I think that the train, so to speak, has left the station so far already that perhaps there is already such a large and vocal view, anti-China view in the States, that I don't know whether or not it can be tempered and wound back anytime soon. Obviously, I would like it to be, because I have, like I said, I lived in New York for 4 years. I have many American friends. My brothers live in America, and so I would like it to be better. But I don't know. I really don't know.
What Geoffrey has said makes a lot of sense, because I feel like most Westerners have a very condescending view towards China, and not just China, but also Eastern culture in general. I think, but in contrast to that, I feel like we should be very proud to be Chinese, and even Hong Kongers, they should not have this condescending view towards the mainland, because China is one of the most sophisticated civilizations on earth. It has one of the richest histories in human history, even. And I feel like Eastern values have to be respected. The West, or America, or the American establishment, to be precise, they may be afraid of China's rise, they may be afraid of losing that top spot, but I think in a way it's an inevitable part of history that eventually China would recover its position in the world, and not just China, but also India. I feel like the East and the West have to cooperate together, because if we keep on fighting for that top spot, it's not good for humanity in general.
So which path should the US follow in the future relations with China? You did mention before cooperation, so cooperation isn't better than war?
Cooperation and mutual existence definitely much better than war. Back to when they were like in the 1980s, 90s, it's about compete, but also coexistence and cooperation, rather than just now, right now, which is just pure toxic competition. So yeah, I would much prefer that the US and China can mutually coexist and try to progress further and cooperate.
Spending my life in the tech space, we've always viewed technology and innovation as an area that can help bring humanity together, and that's why a lot of us that do what we do, is the reason why, one of the reasons why. And I think unfortunately right now what we're seeing is the technology aspect of it is actually serving as the separator right now. It's interesting that TikTok is not the first nor the last. We've also heard rumblings about soon to be banning WeChat. But again, it's a very different situation when you talk about banning WeChat. Not to belittle TikTok at all, but TikTok is aimed or developed for entertainment, content consumption, and for advertising spend. Whereas WeChat is not. It's not a messaging app. It's not the same as a Facebook Messenger or something. But again, it just shows that how condescending and how little understanding the U.S. government and Trump have, or at large have, of Chinese technology and Chinese apps. I mean, there is nothing else like the WeChat ecosystem globally. It's not just a messaging tool. It's the only platform of its size that's been designed specifically for trade. Global commerce is conducted on WeChat, across WeChat. I think the last Tsinghua University and report that came out last month said over 1 trillion RMB in global cross-border trade was conducted on across the WeChat ecosystem last year, and every day over 1 billion commercial transactions are carried out on WeChat.
Wow.
So 1 billion individual commercial transactions are carried out on WeChat, and 1 trillion RMB in cross-border trade. So when you talk about banning something like that, it's a very different situation than banning a consumer type platform. Not to mention just the human cost as well. We have a very large Chinese diaspora all around the world. These two guys are in the UK, got a couple of million Chinese in America. They use WeChat to communicate with their families. That's what they use to communicate with their families back home. So if you remove that from them, how are they going to communicate with their families? There is nothing else to replace it. So again, I think it's it's a very dangerous path that we're going down, and I really hope that the common sense prevails.
Yeah, right.
And I have confidence that it can. Right. I mean, there's no need for us to head to where we're headed.
Right. But just one thing I wanted to add to that. I feel like what Geoffrey has said makes a lot of sense, because what Trump is essentially doing, he is depriving normal Americans of their freedom to use TikTok and their freedom to choose whatever apps they want to use, which is firstly very hypocritical, but secondly it also reflects the kind of disconnect the political establishment in developed, mature Western so-called liberal democracies with its voters. The electorate, they don't really care about
alleged national security.
Right, alleged national security concerns, which a recent FBI report has said that there's no verifiable evidence that TikTok creates such a concern. But anyway, I feel like in Western democracies, the political establishment are only concerned with their own interest. A very minority. For in the UK, you have the aristocrats or the business interests, and in America, it's just the business interests, right? They don't care about the common man. I feel like the difference between the Chinese system and the US or the UK system is in China, they actually care about the common person, right? All the high-level Communist Party officials, they started from the bottom, worked their way up, so they know about the concerns of the farmers, concerns of the modern generation, and so on and so forth. But whereas in America, you have people who spend 50, 60 years in Congress, and they have absolutely no idea of how life it is for the average American. I mean, just look at the stimulus package. All of the money has gone to the business interests, to the entrepreneurs, right? Basically, none of them is less for the common people. I mean, we have a saying about this, which is America has socialism for the rich and capitalism for the poor, which basically means that if a bank fails, no problem, we'll just bail you out. This is what happened in 2008. None of the bankers had to take the fall for that. None of them had to suffer any sort of consequences, right? But who is bearing the cost in America is the common people. It's the middle class who have had their savings eradicated by the insane amounts of printing of money, insane amounts of inflation. And whenever they have high inflation, they just change the consumer index. And then when the inflation was at like 9% in 2010, and then they changed the consumer price index, and then they're like, oh, we have 2% inflation, job done. So that's so hypocritical, and that's so undemocratic, right?
Exactly. We're very happy to share our views on like TikTok, US-China relations. We hope this can be resolved very quickly. And also please remember to subscribe to our channel by searching KEYBROS, which is Key Bros, on YouTube.
For anyone interested in more about the China Matters hashtag on LinkedIn, where I write more from a technology and economic perspective, please follow me there and comment. And also challenge me on anything that you don't agree with.
I also want to make a public invitation to anybody who does not agree with like today's opinion to take part of our show and to have a debate also with the Key Bros. I think they will be very happy to have that. So I'm making this public invitation. Remember to subscribe to our channel and watch our video. And we have a slogan. We say through dots we connect. Can you say for us?
Yeah.
Through dots we connect. Yeah. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.